Lots of people remember the 90s as a bleak time for horror movies, stepping away from the seminal slashers of the 80s and running headfirst into schlocky teen drama. Horror changed considerably between the decades before evening out into the good old torture porn, zombie romps, and found footage flicks of the noughties. And yes, noughties is the worst word ever. If you take a look at the quality of movies that were being churned out, Scream was a defining effort that saved a period whilst the rest of the genre seemed to take a bit of a breather. To say the 90s was all bad would just be an outright lie, however, since it was the era that birthed Teenage Alien Showdown movie The Faculty and Girl Power Gone Wrong extravaganza The Craft, both of which deserve to be added to your watch list right now if you haven't happened across them before. And digging a little deeper into the decade reveals plenty of films that slip between the cracks of popular consensus at the time, making for a whole catalogue of bizarre films that have been written off for no good reason at all. So, in the spirit of low-rise jeans and tattoo chokers, let's get serious with this throwback. I am the Fresh Princess, Ash from What Culture, and these are the 10 most underrated 90s horror movies. 10. Cemetery Man. Life is hard when you're Francesco Della Morte, who lives on the edge of a cemetery doing his duties as a caretaker for those buried in Buffalora, even when the residents are less than kind to him. Life is even harder for the dead though, since they keep reanimating only to get beaten back into submission by the end of Della Morte's spade as he attempts to keep the town clear of a zombie upheaval. When Francesco falls in love with a woman whilst all these bodies are hopping up out of the ground, however, everything turns on its head. Cemetery Man is a neat little horror that isn't afraid to be extra weird, with undead lovers and strange visual metaphors running as wild as death does in the small Italian town. Flying mostly under the radar since its release, if you were the fan of the zombie renaissance we suffered through recently, then this oddball movie will slot nicely into your collection. 9. Perfect Blue. Not your average psychological horror, Perfect Blue is from the world of anime, a Japanese animation that can depict its bending of reality and fiction far more horrifyingly than anything captured on screen due to its trippy medium. Whilst Perfect Blue has been well received worldwide since its release, it seems to only crop up in underground circles since it isn't a live-action piece, which is a damn shame when you actually get to watching it. The plot follows a young woman who decides to leave her J-pop group for an acting career. She starts out on a gritty crime drama that allows her to move away from the innocent girl group image of her earlier life, but one particularly obsessed fan won't let her forget her past. Her life choices become increasingly difficult, and her world begins to spiral out of control, leading to plenty of nasty scenarios stipulated by blood and discomfort. This is an exploitation movie like you've never seen before, unbridled from the constraints of reality and Western convention in the process. 8. In the Mouth of Madness. John Carpenter is obviously renowned for his work on The Thing and Halloween, with a whole host of movies before and after that cemented his role as a legend of the horror genre. One that often slips by unsuspecting fans, however, is In the Mouth of Madness, a homage to the late and great Lovecraft in its execution as all sorts of monstrous hell breaks loose on our earthly plane. When horror writer Sutter Crane mysteriously vanishes, an insurance investigator attempts to find clues in Crane's texts, ending up in a strange town that bears an eerie resemblance to the recurring setting of the author's work. Stuck somewhere between reality and Crane's imagination, the film is full of supernatural surprises that reveal the pen to be far mightier than the sword, especially in the hands of such a twisted individual as Kane. Drawing on the inspiration from the ongoing legacy of Stephen King too, In the Mouth of Madness is a love letter to the spooky guys that built the written foundation that horror movies crawl up from now. 7. Man Bites Dog. If you heard this film described as a Belgian mockumentary movie shot in black and white, you'd be right to think that Man Bites Dog is far artsier than any horror movie has the right to be. That is, of course, until you learn that said documentary format devolves into the film crew actively participating in helping a serial killer get his kicks, filming their antics for fun as they go. Man Bites Dog is renowned as a good movie, but it still falls short of popular opinion compared to other films of the era. As a 90s horror, it is criminally overlooked by fans and the industry alike. An independent movie that mocked reality TV and its trappings before they even rose to their full popularity. The film deserves much higher praise for its pin-sharp commentary, even if it is mostly just a deeply disturbing watch that you won't forget in a hurry. 6. Dark City. If you've ever heard of a little movie called The Matrix, then you owe that pleasure to Dark City, the original techno-goth horror that inspired much of what went down in the Wachowski siblings trilogy. Dark City tells the tale of a man who can't remember the crimes he's been accused of committing, waking up to find himself on the run from a series of murders and a shady collective known only as the Strangers. Of course, no tie to the Matrix would be complete without a chosen one discovering the truth of a world controlled by dark forces. And the telekinetic John serves up that trench coat realness perfectly. Dark City is a creepy neo-noir with undertones of genuine terror. A world ruled by weird pale folk that control everything from our thoughts to our very mental compositions as we know it. If you thought the government was watching your every move, then you're not entirely wrong. 5. Cube. Unfairly overlooked in almost every aspect, Cube is the gritty little horror movie that takes place entirely in a giant, well, cube of course, in which a group of people are thrown in and left to attempt their escape from its many deadly traps. Unsure of how they got there and faced with mathematical puzzles almost impossible to comprehend, navigating the maze's many rooms of cheese wire chopping and fireball spewing contraptions is one thing, and discovering the real reason for their entrapment is entirely another. Cube has the feel of an early Would You Rather or exam, pitting one puzzle-like trap against a group of people that have to keep their heads or lose them to free-flying machinery. Even though it's notably small in its execution, it only makes the film that much more interesting, managing to pull off a concept much larger than the 4 walls it confines itself in. If you like a little mystery with your people being diced into finely chopped mincemeat, then you'll like Cube. 4. Nightbreed. Containing perhaps one of the most terrifying villains to only ever appear in one horror movie, Nightbreed is born from the incredibly strange mind of Clive Barker, the man behind Hellraiser, and who wrote scripts for Candyman and the Midnight Meat Train. If you needed any more convincing of his leanings to a dark dimension full of monsters and death, then he's also put his name to video games like Undying and Jericho. Basically, man knows what he's doing. Nightbreed, then, is the story of an underground city of benevolent monstrous people, Midian, which Aaron Boone eventually discovers after being plagued by dreams of the place. However, a terrifying serial killer is hot on his tail, meaning the citizens of Midian must come together to take down the real force of evil out to wreak havoc on human and monster alike. Like a good cheese, Nightbreed has only gotten better with age. And with loads of lovely monster sightings for fans of the genre, a genuinely scary central antagonist, and a visionary, creepy world, it really does have something for everyone. 3. Apt Pupil. When it comes to Stephen King, there's always space on our shelves for another film adaptation to attempt to bring his weird worlds to life. And the 90s had some of his most successful works to date. From Misery to The Green Mile to The Shawshank Redemption, King movies absolutely knocked it out of the park. So it's no surprise that 1 or 2 fell into the bad movie wasteland that houses Sleepwalkers and the It miniseries. Apt Pupil is one such adaptation that didn't get its dues, in which a young boy finds out that his neighbour is a fugitive Second World War criminal who served in the SS. Trading a promise to keep his secret if he teaches him things about the war he could never learn in school, Todd soon begins to get embroiled in a series of events that threaten to expose both his Nazi teacher and Tobb's subterfuge, neither of which would end well for the schoolboy. It's incredibly tense, building both a spoken and invisible horror through subject matter and implications alike. 2. Hardware. The cyber horror of the 90s comes into full force with Richard Stanley's Hardware, the horror movie answer to what happens if you make the Terminator and Alien have a gross metal baby. Finding robot parts in the irradiated wastelands of planet Earth, a nomad decides to pick it up and bring it back, selling it on to a man and his artist girlfriend Jill to see what she can make with it. Now kids, here comes the lesson. Don't pick up future space robots you find in the dust when you don't know where they've been. This one turns out to be a fully armed military weapon that activates in Jill's apartment, hell-bent on killing her after repairing its own body. Because of course, they found the faulty deadly robot head with a self-repair mechanism of all the things it could have needed. Hardware has a tone that veers all over the place, admittedly, but its atmosphere is incredibly well constructed. What it lacks in its messiness, it more than makes up for in style, making it an underrated gem in the long run. 1. Kronos. Guillermo del Toro is well regarded as a talent across the industry in contemporary cinema. Pan's Labyrinth and The Orphanage have long since proved he's worth his weight in gold with his refined brand of fantastical horror. But his first feature film, Kronos, is often forgotten as one of the building blocks that got him there. It's critically acclaimed worldwide, beautifully shot, and brilliantly conceptual. But where the hell has it been all our lives? Kronos is the story of a 400-year-old scarab discovered by an antiques dealer, Jesus, with a special functionality that allows it to attach to a wearer. Once latched on, it gives youth and life, but also an endless thirst for blood, which turns out to be the epitome of too good to be true. With an interested millionaire after the very same scarab, Jesus is plunged into a world of mounting consequences. But hey, he looks really good and young whilst all this shit goes down around him, so The film is a fantastic watch, combining an excellent story with Del Toro's deft horror touch, and is the most arresting version of a vampire legend you'll ever happen across in cinema.